We're live right now, man. So we're going to wait for we having some technical difficulties. Everybody that's tuning in right now, welcome to the intellectual property session, patents, trademark, copyrights, and we're going to get into the nitty gritty of IPs going on. So in the meantime, between time, we got some other guests joining us. But again, sometimes technology happens. There's a pandemic going on right now. So don't blame anybody. There's this coronavirus. We're just going to put it all on that. In the meantime, I will be moderator today. I'm George K. Burns, comedian, actor, writer, and I am joined by two talented guests right now, Carolyn Pitt. If you just give a brief introduction about yourself.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, George. I am Carolyn Pitt. I am the founder and CEO of Film Connects. We are the job marketplace for film, and we connect studios to vetted local crew. We are based here in the Atlanta area and work with clients all over the country. I'm also an intellectual property litigator and previously practiced at Alston & Bird.
Okay. She said litigator, so I'll let you know that she means business, but she's serious. Next up, George Dawkins. One of my HBCU comrades. Go ahead and give a brief introduction about yourself.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Georgia Dawkins, and I am the Purpose Producer. I create content that helps other people heal. I'm all about being in position for other people to reach their destiny. By trade, I'm a television producer, got my start in local news, actually Good Morning America, so network and then local, then back to network. And I now work as an entertainment journalist on Central Ave from executive producer Will Packer and Debmar Mercury.
Absolutely. I'm super excited about today, man. We got some good stuff to talk about. And I'm glad you mentioned healing, because right now after 2020, we're going to need a lot of healing, and especially after this political campaign. So let's just jump right into it, man. Let's jump right into it. What is intellectual property and how important is that?
That's such a weighted question. Intellectual property in general is something that has been created that needs protection. So it can take a tangible form, like a product, a book. It can be intangible. It can be something that you have created that is an idea. For instance, a trademark is a way to protect the way that you have been presenting yourself to the market. But what you should know is that IP is incredibly important. And there's a ton of value in intellectual property, especially as businesses grow and become more successful. And so all businesses, whether they're small or large, need to protect any and all things that they have created or that they have rights to, whether they've purchased them or come across them in some other sort of way.
I'm one person who had to look up the definition because I had to learn things the hard way after moving to Atlanta, which I think is the best thing about this panel is I've experienced this intellectual property debate on the corporate level and on the entrepreneurial level, and to the point where I've lost millions of dollars. So the only reason I agreed to do this panel today is if I could tell the truth and let you know that I'm an example of what not to do.
I look forward to learning more about that. Wow, that's compelling.
Yeah. As soon as she said that she lost millions of dollars, everybody's ears perked up. It's like, hold on. So how can I not do that? That's interesting. I mean, honestly, I'm definitely interested in hearing about what that mistake was, because you hear a lot about IPs and the importance of it. People just throw that word out there, but intellectual property. Oh yeah, he's getting sued so many millions of dollars because they stole this and they stole that, or people are infringing on people's rights or whatnot. So I definitely feel free to share that story so we can all figure out how not to lose millions of dollars.
It's been a journey. It's been a journey, and it's taken me a couple years to heal enough to be able to talk about it without breaking down. So when I moved to Atlanta 4 years ago, I was coming off a layoff. I'd been fired for the first time in my life, a breakup, a layoff, and depression. And so I got this opportunity to move to Atlanta as a freelance producer. Go and write that down, because you need to go ahead and get that in writing. That's where it started, in that job title. What are you coming here to do? And so I came to Atlanta to help create and develop a national talk show, which we now know, and I'll just say it, Sister Circle Live on TV One. And the reason I can now say the name is because I've chosen not to take legal action. Even when I wrote about my story in my book, Everybody Knows the Power of Being in Position, I left a lot of things out because I was unsure of the litigation process. It wasn't until I came on to develop the pilot, I produced the pilot, developed the cast, recruited the cast, produced everything, every element of the pilot. And then once the show was sold, they came back to me and offered me a job, not the job that I did, a lower level job. Would you like to be a digital producer or a segment producer? And I was like, why am I in this position? And that's because I didn't get it in writing to begin with. I didn't know to get it in writing. So I was just grateful to have an opportunity to use my gifts. I get to do these things and create a show that looks like us, that's for us. And I was so excited about that I missed the mark. And so I was hired on as a segment producer, and I worked there for 7 months. And then I resigned because I was so unhappy and I was so conflicted with my role there, and not just my role there, but my role in entertainment. There was so much more for me to do. Well, it wasn't until my last day on the show that I learned that I actually had rights to the concept, that I actually had rights to the name, because I also named the show. And so that was like somebody came and hit me with a truck. What? Now what I'm walking away from is no longer what I thought I was walking away from, but I'm already walking away. So then it was how can I protect myself moving forward? So I went through a couple years of just talking to different attorneys about what is my case? What is my case? What is the value just on the name? What is the value on the concept? What is the value on my contribution? And multiple attorneys told me millions, but it was going to take me so much to get through that fight. And I felt like I'd already lost so much that I couldn't spend another dime. I couldn't spend another dime on this struggle. So I'm continuing to write about it, but it's definitely changed the conversations that I have as it relates to creative television and any other concepts that I create.
Man, that's deep.
Wow.
That's a lot. You said you went through a breakup and you moved. Man, I felt like I was watching like a Tyler Perry, just like sisterhood journey, just right then. That honestly was a lot that you went through, and a lot of, I guess, life lessons in that too. You know, and I think the important factor is knowing what your particular rights are, and it seems like the most important aspect of it, as well as getting it in writing in contractual agreement. So that way, you know what's going on. And, you know, I guess, Carolyn, I guess you can speak to that. You know, how would someone go about differently in that situation when it comes to the contractual agreements, when it comes to having your rights be put in paper, and when it comes to litigation, having something that's the proof in the pudding saying that this is what the agreed terms were?
Yeah, and first I'll say, Georgia, thank you for sharing that story. I know that has to have been a painful situation, and know that by sharing it here, it's going to help so many other people to make sure that they don't make mistakes that are going to be costly, you know, both in terms of money, time, effort, energy, you know, some of the brilliance that you put out into the world. So yeah, there are a number of ways that people protect things that they have created. As I mentioned briefly earlier, for a product that you've created, patents may be available if there's not something in general terms very much like it, exactly like it, that's existed in the world. We can also get patent protection for improvements on things that are in the world. But again, you'd have to talk with an attorney to really understand how that can be achieved. Copyrights. So Georgia is in entertainment as well. And so for songs, for TV show concepts, for books, for a lot of creative things that artists create, they can and should be looking at whether or not they can protect their brilliant ideas and concepts that are brought to life and to fruition that end up making someone else very wealthy. And so what I would say is what other artists and other business owners should do is talk with an attorney. And I know that a lot of people think that talking to an attorney is going to be too expensive. Maybe it's just in the idea phase. It's not that important. That's actually not true. Your idea is very likely worth a lot of money. And in the hands of someone else, will be making someone else money other than you. Trade secret is another type of intellectual property protection that's available. And that's for something similar to what Georgia was just describing. Her ideas, her concept, her title, her cast, all of what she brought to bear for her concept and then presented to someone else, very likely might have been protectable via trade secrets. So there's a number of ways that people can go about it. But what I would say in the very beginning is talk to an attorney. Your trademark is your ability to protect how you represent yourself. For example, our company is called Film Connects, and we have a trademark both for the name itself as well as the logo that represents the company. And that's really important so that no one else can stake a claim to either of those things. It's important when you're even picking a name to either talk with an attorney or talk with someone who is familiar with URLs, with searching in the databases to see how similar it might be to someone else's. And there's a lot more that goes into it. So I'll preface by saying I'm definitely not giving legal advice in anything that I share today, but know that the amount of money that it takes for one consultation with an attorney is likely going to be worth it. You can also attempt to go on the United States Patent and Trademark Office website and do searches yourself.
Carolyn, you still, I think we kind of, Georgia, can you hear me?
I can hear you. I was
Okay,
going to piggyback off that and say, that was what I experienced on the corporate level, but then I experienced it on an entrepreneurial level, just working with other entrepreneurs in Atlanta, to the point where I lost another company. I lost a whole production company, and I almost lost my book. My book, like my story, you could take that. It was just a lot back to back. This was all the same, you guys. But with that, I learned the value of contracts. Because I came up as a local news producer and I signed 2-year contracts, the company was always protected. And I hated to sign contracts because I felt like I was signing away my gifts and my talents. And that's exactly what I was doing, but it protected the company. So as an entrepreneur, I then had to go back and look at my contracts and say, how can I protect my company? How can I protect Georgia?
Absolutely. And you raise an incredible point as well. Oftentimes when you're starting a new job, a company may ask you, especially if you're a creative, especially if you're a more senior employee, to sign something saying that what's created while you work for them, the corporation, becomes their property, and asking that you declare any prior works that you've created. And so that, again, is something to think through and perhaps talk with an attorney about to make sure that you're not signing away anything that you previously created and that you're protecting anything going forward, even if it's in its infancy. But you're right, it can be a tricky line to walk when you're working for a company and are also an artist.
Absolutely. Those are definitely great points. And, when it comes to an idea being protected, that's a very interesting subject in itself because, I work in comedy and it's very hard, specifically in stand-up, to have an idea or a particular joke be something that's copyrighted because it's merely an idea a lot of times. But when it comes to writing, not write as well, having an idea isn't something that you can protect, but it's more so the expression of the idea, right? So there are definitely different levels of which that could be. So you can have an idea, you can have, a synopsis, you can have a treatment, you can have a script. I mean, of course, I think the script is like the probably holy grail when it comes to having something protected. But when it comes to an idea that someone may have, is there a way that they can possibly get that protected, or should they have more of it fleshed out?
So there are ways to protect your ideas, and you're right to be thinking about it in that way. Mentioned earlier, trade secret is one of the ways in which you can protect it. Also, non-disclosure agreements tend to be a good idea if you're sharing your ideas, with the caveat that within the venture capital space, NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, aren't normally used as readily as in other parts of society, including entertainment and corporate America. And so it can be very tricky to protect your ideas if you don't have a non-disclosure agreement, if you aren't able to seek trade secret or copyright protection. But again, I always advise speaking with an attorney who's barred within the state where you are so that you can understand what protections you should seek for the type of intellectual property that you've created or have rights to.
NDAs were definitely something that I had to implement because I also consult with people on their concepts they want me to help develop, or they want me to help develop media coaching. But even with that, because I'm a person who always has ideas, and apparently they're worth a lot of money, I have to protect them. So I offer an NDA. I don't always know that, that's fully protecting me because people will still steal your content.
There are people who will do that. And having in writing what the expectations are and were is definitely protecting yourself so that if you do have to go to court, Or if you're the one taking them to court, you can show to the judge and the jury, here's what we decided upon, and here's what this individual decided to do thereafter that's in contravention and breach of what we discussed.
Yeah, that's super interesting, because in the entertainment space, when you're pitching a product to like a studio or a network or whatnot, a lot of times you'll be sending these things off to executives, and there isn't an NDA that's involved in that process. And a lot of times, if you try to hit them with the NDA, they won't even take the time to read whatever it is that you're sending them. So I think in that environment, it's a part of the norm. And it's pretty rare that people just go outright and steal, but there are cases that people may take an element like a character or, a particular storyline or something that's a plot, but they know how to do it in a way for them not to be in a compromising position to where they may have to go through litigation or be sued. And a lot of times as well, say for instance, you'll have like a late night show or whatnot. They'll have like writing packets that you submit. And before you submit it, they'll make you sign this disclosure saying that anything that you submit to them, because you may give ideas for skits or different monologues or whatnot, and you have to sign this long document letting them know that, hey, you're giving away your rights, because they want to make sure that they're not being put in a position to where they could be sued potentially down the line for any ideas that you give them. So it's interesting just seeing, how different spaces operate, in the entertainment space, especially when it comes to TV and films. It seems like it's more laxed, at least from the network standard, and they don't even a lot of times take your information unsolicited. So unless you're going through like a manager or an agent, they won't even take it because they don't even want to take that risk. Even more so, like, when should founders start thinking about that IP process? Is that something that they should start thinking about right away, or in what process when it comes to building their business should you start thinking about, hey, I need to make sure I'm protecting myself?
Yeah, my response is early and often. As soon as you have that idea, like George's ideas, make sure that you are keeping them protected, even the physical copies. You want to make sure that you are figuring out what's the best way to keep this locked down, because like you said, your ideas are worth gold. I saw you smiling as well, Georgia. What's your response to this?
I'm triggered, Carolyn. I'm triggered. You're talking about all the things, but I was thinking about this also on I don't want to say a more micro entrepreneurial level. I went from the corporate experience to let me now create my own company and let me write my own book and publish my own book so that I know I'm keeping that ownership. Well, I was doing so much at the same time that I launched a production company with a friend. And it was 7 months into this venture that I realized I didn't have any ownership in this company that I'd been running for 7 months.
Oh, wow.
Yes, they handed me a contract that said, yeah, all the things that you've been doing, I want you to keep doing that. But we're only going to pay you this and you have no ownership. And I was like, wait a minute. I know I have a text message that says I'm a co-founder. But it's a text message, And then I had to weigh the risk. Is it worth fighting for? How much money did I already put into it? How much time did I already put in? Is it worth going to bat for this company? And then I had to do it again for my book, to the point where I had to republish a second edition so that I knew that I absolutely had the ownership of my story.
Wow, that's crazy.
I was just going to say, it's so important that even in addition to your IP documentation, that you make sure that you have partnership agreements, because working with friends, folks that you think are your friends, things can look really different down the road. And unless you have in writing what that expectation was and what the division of equity ownership, it can get very murky. And it sounds as though that individual that you were working with had very different ideas of the value of your work and whether or not it was theirs or yours, which I'm sorry to hear that.
Well, thanks.
I hope
I'm in therapy, guys. I'm working on it. We're absolutely not friends. I blocked them even on the Bible app. For the first time in my life, I had to block somebody on the Bible app. Yes, I don't even want to know what you're talking to God about. I don't want to know. Yeah. I don't want to know.
You talk to God about that idea you thought. That's what we're gonna do. Like that, and that's crazy as well. Like, Carolyn, is there any protection? Say, for instance, that you have like a handshake agreement, because a lot of people think that there are some states that still exist that, oral agreements do still exist, that you can go to court with that. Or say, for instance, you have a text message, but you also have this contract. How would someone go about that in the court system? Can you say that, hey, I was led to believe this, but somehow got maybe tricked into signing this contract? Is that something that you have protection under?
So again, I will not be providing legal advice on today's panel, but what I will say is
trying to back Carolyn in the legal advice on
just invoice us, Carolyn. Just
right,
invoice.
Right, exactly. Just send an invoice.
What I will say is case law has shown that very simple things like handshakes and oral agreements and other things that aren't written at times have arisen to a contract, depending on the state, depending on the circumstance. Your attorney would likely tell you, get anything in writing. That's going to supersede and prevail much more easily than something that's not tangibly written and agreed to by both parties and dated. So I would not rely upon it. However, a text message and email, those are all written as well. So that's going to have a little more standing than something that's not actually captured in writing somewhere.
So, I mean,
I love it.
What do people say about the statute of limitations? Because the text message was from 2018, and I know 2020 almost over.
So, Georgia, we're going to be talking after the call, aren't we?
That's what it sounds like.
I'm anticipating the invoice. I'm anticipating the invoice.
So you're right that there are statute of limitations, but when you can, I will just underscore that getting something in writing, particularly that is drafted by someone who is an attorney, that is signed by both parties, is going to give you much more solid protection than anything else. And I would definitely advise you to consider that as your best form of protection for anything you've created, helped to create, purchased, come to own, like anything that's yours that you value. Someone else may value more, and you got to do what you can to make sure it stays in your possession.
I like what you said about value. I know, George, you're moderating, but when you don't know the value of what
That's
you
fine.
have,
I'm just here.
When you don't know the value of what you have, people will take advantage of that because they see it. And for so long, I didn't see the value of what I had. I just thought I was having, another idea, another daydream. I didn't know it could actually be a talk show that, stood for 3 seasons on a major network. Like, I didn't know the value of my idea, but somebody else did. So before you even know the value, just write it down.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, and I would even add, like, if you have an idea, definitely go through and detail it, because, like you said, like, it's not a lot of protection that's involved with ideas. I can't just come to a network and say, I got this idea for something, and then next thing the idea is developed into something that's an entire show or entire series, and they have characters and they have episode ideas. That's going to be something that you don't have any control over. And that's why I always believe in making sure you register everything that you are writing down. If there are any writers that are on the panel or in the session right now, definitely register whatever you have with the Writers Guild and copyright it. And keep the email chains as well. I love a good email chain. Per our discussion, I'm that guy. I don't care. I just want to make sure that you know what's being said during that time, because IP, especially in the entertainment sphere, is very important. Like, Hollywood seems like it's just being IP driven completely right now. That's why we have so many remakes and reboots of everything. They want to make sure whatever they're putting on screen has already an audience that comes with it. That's why the top grossing film, Avengers, the IP driven movie, because it already had an audience that was attached to it. So I definitely hear everything that you're saying in that regard. I guess when you do put in a patent or a copyright, how long is that protected under law?
It differs for each type of IP protection that you're seeking. For instance, if you have a song or a book, it can last, and you have copyright provision, it can last for 70 years of the life of the individual who created it. So just what I would say again is consult with your attorney.
Or your attorney friend, just what I'm gonna tell you.
Or your attorney friend. A lot of people who have attorney friends prefer to reach out and ask when they have questions. And one of the things you mentioned for creatives, especially, I think it's a mind shift to think about protecting your intellectual property, because the whole joy in what you've created is that it came from you and you are passionate about it. And thinking about the business side is something that probably doesn't seem as much fun or as interesting. Which is why it's great to have an attorney friend or someone who can help remind you, another creative who's had a challenge before that can remind you of how important it is. Also within technology, there are elements of the code that you might have written for your proprietary software that might be something that you can protect and should protect. If you happen to use open source code, you might not be able to protect it. It may also jeopardize whether or not you can protect your app or your website overall. So again, I would recommend thinking as expansively as possible. And then it's better for your attorney friend or attorney to tell you, no, you can't have protection than, oh my goodness, yes, you should have gotten this protected years ago. And now here we are in court battling to try to help you retain it.
When do you know you need to actually get an attorney and, stop using your friend?
So it depends on who you have as your friend. What I would say is when you are looking to protect something that you've created, you want to have someone who does IP law. And also is within your state is very helpful, but definitely does IP law at a minimum, especially if they are attempting to help you file something with the USPTO, the U.S. Patent and Trade Office, or helping to see whether or not you actually may want to file a patent, whether you have rights to it, whether a business method patent makes sense. So having a friend who does trust and estates law or divorce law, personal injury law is not going to help you with your IP. You want to talk with someone who does this day in and day out and can really give you solid advice. And in terms of timing, I'm going to say it's almost never too soon because what both of your careers really are built upon is your ideas, your concepts, your delivery of those. And so, yeah, I would say let them tell you it's too early and come back rather than, oh my gosh, you should have come to me last year.
I see a question in the chat, and guys, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. We'll make sure we get to them as best as we possibly can. Someone asked if they did not have the cash to be able to afford an attorney, what's the best way for them to be able to protect their work?
Yeah, so I will not be giving any legal advice on this panel today. However, I'll tell you, it really isn't that challenging to, for instance, register your own trademark. If you go to the uspto.gov website, it's a little more than $200 to register it. If you read through everything and input everything, you'll be assigned to an individual at the USPTO who is an examiner who will correspond back and forth with you. So if there's something that you missed or they have any questions, it is a process that likely you might be able to manage on your own. And that's, $200 that makes sense. And I can see domain names as well. You can search for domain names on WIPO, WIPO, and some other searches. You can go on GoDaddy, in fact, and other server .com providers and see whether or not the URL that you want is either already out there or if something similar is already out there. You can also check to see who owns the domain that you want to have. And keep in mind, there are top-level domains like .coms, there are .us's, .gov, .biz. There's a lot of other domains that are out there. For most folks, the .com tends to be the one that people default to, as that's where most people look when they're looking for your business. But before you spend the time and energy developing a concept, creating swag, t-shirts and hats, and holding yourself out as a business, you really should do your research, see if that URL is available, see if people can pronounce the name, see what it makes people think of when you say the name, so that you aren't spending too much time, money, energy, capital for something that either people won't be able to remember or that's too similar to something else. So just some things to think through.
And I would add to that, don't allow anybody to purchase it for you. Because what had happened was I allowed someone to purchase my thepurposeproducer.com on my behalf. And when that business partnership fell apart, that person held my website hostage, it's just the URL. There was like no site to go to, but held that site to the point where I'm checking every couple months, praying that you didn't renew it so that I can now grab it. And so it took me almost 2 years to get that back.
So that's crazy as well. And know that there are cyber squatters who will reserve a name knowing that you might want it or that someone might want it. So that makes it even more challenging. One of the things that's exciting about IP law is that it is a field of law about what's burgeoning, what's new, what's hot, and how will the courts decide upon it. So social media and all things IP are always changing. But yeah, that's something that happens a lot. And you may end up having to pay X amount of dollars to the tens and hundreds of thousands to access a site, a URL that you think should be yours. I see a question as well was asked about why VCs don't agree to NDAs. They just normally don't. It's one of those things that in the industry has become commonplace. And so ways in which you can protect yourself, a couple different things. So there are some sites out there where you can keep your data room, your pitch deck, other items that are important to you. DocSend is one of them. And you can lock them away and then have the person who you're giving access to provide their email and some other things in order to access that. You can make those documents disappear after a certain amount of time. You can share shorter and smaller versions, so like a teaser deck, and not all of your information. You can decide to only share sort of the full Monty of what you want to share in person with no recording devices. It's not the same as an NDA, of course, but there are ways that you can attempt to keep what you've created under your control and custody, and not have them be taken by other individuals. Not completely foolproof, but those are things that you can do.
Yeah, that's why it seems like that's almost like a barrier for some people, like to having the NDAs, because like I say, entertainment producers, you can't hit them with the NDA. They're just not going to just read whatever script that you're sending them or whatever pitch ideas that you have. They're just going to be like, okay, whatever, we're going to the next one. And sometimes they may hit you with the NDA if they decide to agree or give your project an option agreement to go into finding someone that will actually invest in the project. But that in itself, I see another question here. It says, what protections do no-code apps have, if any, that are built on no-code app builder platforms?
I will not be providing legal advice today, but what I'll say is you likely have stronger protections if it is proprietary code that you or your development team created. That doesn't mean that you won't have protection on a no-code app, but when you use open source code, it becomes less likely that you're able to protect the entirety of the app or portions of it. So I would definitely talk to an attorney about that. Doesn't mean that the idea itself or its expression isn't protected, but the code itself, if it's no code, may or may not be as protected as something that you and your development team created from scratch.
Yeah, when I saw the no codes, I didn't have any idea what they were talking about at all. Is that something? What is a no code app?
Yeah, so there are some. Yeah, there's some platforms out there that will help you to build your own app or website without having to create the code behind it. So if you're developing a marketplace, you're developing a shopping site, they can provide enough to get you most of the way there that you can then personalize and put your own facade and your own trademark and your own spin on it. And so because most of that infrastructure is provided and it's not unique, you didn't come up with it on your own, it is much harder to get protection for something that is no code. However, what you're adding to it, maybe there's something there. I would consult with an attorney in your state to find out if there's something there that you can't protect.
Oh, okay, I didn't even know that. So it's different apps that you can do, well, different programs that will actually do the coding for you, but you just customize it to whatever it is that you want, and you can still somehow have protection for that.
So no, what I said was if it's a no-code app, it's probably less likely that you can have protection for it. So ordinarily something that's proprietary that you, your CTO, your development team created, gotcha, you might be able to protect it. If it's a no-code app, it's like someone giving you, you know, most of a lunchbox with everything in there, and then you just put your drink in.
Oh, gotcha.
You might be able to protect your drink, but not the rest of the lunchbox and everything that was provided to get you most of the way there. And it's great that no-code apps exist because it helps entrepreneurs to much more quickly get their ideas to market, to, you know, see if they actually are solving a problem, if they have product market fit, without investing a lot of time, energy, and money into building a proprietary app. A lot of entrepreneurs, especially entrepreneurs of color and female entrepreneurs, have a harder time accessing capital. So being able to use these no-code apps to get you there much faster, do the testing, and really build a business, it's fantastic to have. But just know that when you do that, that no-code app and whatever improvement or addition you made may not be protected. And the entire thing may not be either because of using it. But I would talk to an attorney.
That's interesting. You brought up too about the disparity amongst, you know, African American of color, women of color having, you know, difficulty when it comes to gaining capital for whatever venture that they're going into. Is there any type of challenges that may persist for people of color when it comes to gaining rights, or do you see people taking advantage of people of color when it comes to, you know, pertaining rights to whatever their project is or whatever their idea is?
Georgia, do you want to tackle that one first? If not, I'll jump in.
I was going to say, don't be afraid to do the work, because I know that is true. There are, you know, we are marginalized in some aspects, in almost every aspect. But don't be afraid to do the work. I saw somebody say something about terms of agreement. You know, that attorney friend is probably going to tell you, well, what do you want out of it? You know, and so then you have to go write it. So a lot of times we're not getting the money and we're not getting the results because we're not doing the work. And I'm guilty of that. So it's out there. The resources are there. you got to go do it. And don't be afraid to use your friends as resources, your friends who are also starting businesses. Maybe you guys can invest in something together. Let's take this class. Let's tag, let me get your notes. Bring the resources together, because community is our lifeline. Community is how we're going to survive.
It absolutely is. And even with the question about terms of an agreement. So you don't have to have an attorney draft your terms and agreements. Should you? Probably. But what you can do to save some of the capital that we often have a much harder time accessing, you can take the first or second stab at it and then show up not with a blank canvas, but what your intentions are and even what you believe should be in those terms and agreements. That will then take that attorney less time to polish it off and make sure that it contains all the provisions that it needs to have. And to your initial question, George, I am of the opinion that it is well known that professionals of color bring incredible brilliance to all that we do. And I think whenever those who have been gifted a lot may be targeted more for things that are taken away. And so we have to always just be mindful of how we can keep what is ours locked down and safe. And in terms of accessing capital, yes, in terms of venture, every year, Black women access 0.0006% of venture capital for their businesses every year. So less than a percentage point. And Black founders collectively, 1% of venture capital. White women, 2% of venture capital. So that means that 97% of venture capital is provided to white male-led teams every year. So there's a lot of things to think through when you're building a business to make sure that you are thinking expansively about alternative ways to finance your business, and by all means protecting what you are creating and have already created.
Wow, that's crazy. You broke those numbers down, just knowing just how much money is being left on the table and how much money that we don't even have access to, just within the marketplace. And I know that there are just so many hurdles that we have to go through, and especially, from, as people of color, but, especially as a woman of color too, it seems like those barriers to entry are even steeper than anyone else. So I definitely commend both of you guys for just being a part of the fight. And like you said too, another big point was education. Like, we definitely need to do a better part of educating ourselves. And like Georgia said, doing the work on the back end and not relying on other people, because there are resources there, but we have to make sure that we're at the head of that first and foremost.
And take advantage of 2020 as well. A lot of my friends who are entrepreneurs have been granted these grants, have been awarded these grants to keep their businesses going, because a lot of corporations are feeling guilty about that 97%. And so they're trying to make up for it in this age of COVID and of social injustice. They're using that as a PR tactic, but the money is still green. So I would encourage you to go check out those applications, because it's working. And my friends have gotten thousands, more than $10,000 from various organizations who are looking for Black businesses to invest in. And that could be your legal fund. That could be the money you set aside to talk to an attorney for real, and not just text them or to get them to do the terms and agreements.
No, it's absolutely the case that 2020, the silver lining, if there is one, is that there's now more access to capital, as you mentioned. And so what is interesting is it's been needed for a long time, and it's being presented like a new idea that the capital needs to be provided to our businesses. 2020 has also been devastating for Black businesses. So 41% of our businesses are estimated to have shut down permanently. So those businesses that still remain definitely need infusions of capital. Another thing that's come in addition to corporations providing grants is opportunities to talk with VCs via their office hours. And that's something I've been able to take advantage of. Other founder friends have as well. And that's critical, because network and networking is key to being able to secure not only capital, but also access to influencers and advisors and individuals who can help you on your path. There are a lot more people who have been open now to opening up their Calendly and other calendar links so that founders of color can connect with them. And there's a website called techforblackfounders.com that has a listing of a growing number of companies that are providing their tools and their capabilities for free to Black-owned companies. So there are some ways that we're seeing the tide shift in a positive way to get more resources and bring them to bear for Black and brown founders than was the case prior to 2020 and the social unrest, the pandemic, and the other interesting things that this year has brought.
That's amazing. It seems like 2020 has definitely taken away opportunities, but opened up a whole new other window of opportunity, especially when the virtual field. I've seen a bunch of DJs start popping off and, going with the quarantine radios of the world. And it seems like it's really changing the scope of what's possible, especially for entrepreneurs out here. I see another question in here. I'm not necessarily sure if there is any music experience on the panel, but there is one that says musicians, they're facing slavery contracts in the music industry right now. And is there anything that could be done about that going forward? And I know that's something that's always, a touchy subject when it comes to rights, because it seems as if like the industry, when you get in these labels, that they pretty much control everything about you, like your music, the rights to your actual name. Can you speak on that at all? I don't know if.
What I will say is it has been a longstanding issue, as you've said, and similar to comedy, to production, video production, music has had challenges with individuals looking to retain their rights. Most notably, Prince wrote Slave on his face years ago before he was able to actually get the masters and the rights to them, and to what happened to those masters back in his own control. And I would say that it's challenging. There are some great resources out there. Oh my goodness, I'm about to forget the name of it. There's an excellent book called This Business of Music, I believe. It's very thick. It's probably in this bookcase right behind me. And it explains a lot about music distribution and rights, working with studios and labels, that I highly recommend. And I will make sure that I get that out if I don't have it correct. Someone maybe will correct me in the chat. But making sure that you're availing yourself not only of attorneys, but reading on your own and making sure you understand, how splits are determined, making sure that you read the fine print. Those contracts for musicians are long and they're probably not that interesting. It's worth reading it yourself, as well as having your attorney read it and explain to you any provisions that don't make any sense, so that you can do your best to retain, once again, what you've created.
No, definitely. Some of those contracts are like a book when it comes. Like, I don't even understand how some of you guys understand it, because as someone that, I have a doctorate in pharmacy and whatnot, but that language is so different that you look at it and you may think that you know what you're looking at, but somehow, they got you going a whole which way, looking like you're looking at the Matrix by a whole point, and you don't even know what you're signing at the end of the day. So I think that's definitely great advice. Is there any way that people could probably educate themselves on how to read those contracts? That's something I've always been interested in, because when I'm reading it, I just feel like I'm not qualified to understand what this is. It might as well be Portuguese.
You probably are qualified to do it. The link to the book is now in the chat, so definitely check out that book and other resources. There also are courses at local colleges that provide paralegal studies, contracts courses, especially during this time of COVID. A lot of universities have made their coursework free, and it's digital, so you can access it. So I would look at Udemy and LinkedIn Learning, and just your local university. Cornell, I know, has a program. See if there are any courses on contracts, just general contracts. And if there are any on entertainment contracts, even better. The more information you have, the more power you have to make sure that you are protecting anything that you create. And it makes sense, not only to have a great attorney, but to understand the information yourself, and what you don't understand, to know what questions to ask, so that you can come to know what it is that you are signing.
Definitely great information. George, I had a question for you. When it came to your show, and a lot of times you'll see in shows that there'll be products placed in, like for product placement in those shows. Was that something that Sister Circle had?
I don't think that they ever got it off the ground, but that's something like the Real, they do the product placement, even Wendy, the sponsored segments as well. And that's more money for the show, not necessarily for the producer. Whereas in sales, you would get a percentage of this account that you brought in.
Oh, okay. Is there any particular rights that are involved in having a product on the show?
Not to my knowledge.
Like a licensing agreement? Okay.
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Yeah, because I've always wondered about that too. If that was something that needed to be, you need to have a licensing agreement in order to put a product on a particular show. But, they can go in because, well, Carolyn, I see you
There are occasions
Yeah.
when there will be an agreement that is come to in order to place a product, not just in TV, but for film, commercials, and other things as well. It just depends.
Yeah, that's interesting as well. And in my field too, I'm seeing that IP is becoming somewhat almost a hindrance to some writers because it's becoming so IP driven now. And just as a way of advice for people that are trying to get into writing now, there's probably two things that you can kind of like get around that. So you can either write about two genres that are pretty much IP resistant at this point in time. That's thrillers and horrors. Those always are taking independent works. Those are something that, you know, a lot of people, you don't necessarily need something proven in order for that to work. And also, if you have a product or like a script yourself, turning it into a novel first, or a graphic novel or a comic book, and creating your own IP. So when people come and they ask you, hey, does this have IP already? You can say that, hey, I already put it out as such. And so that way it has its own IP. But it's interesting seeing now how things are shifting in that regard, because like back in the 90s, man, like that was like the era of just independent films. Like you just had so many just original ideas in that point in time. And now everything is just based upon a book. You got the Twilights of the world. That's why you got like 28 different Fast and Furiouses, because they want to just go back to back. Vin Diesel going to be 70 years old, still doing them things, you know. So it's interesting seeing how things are changing now. Georgia, and I guess in that, this is a question for you. Do you see yourself staying in the realm of, because Sister Circle was more of a talk show, correct? If I'm accurate with that?
Yeah, no, talk
right,
show,
cool.
yes.
Are you looking to go into TV and film too, or are you just trying to stay in that space?
I'm a media mogul. I feel like I should come out. I should just let you guys know. So all of that is coming, but I had to first protect my intellectual property, which is my brain, where the source, the foundation of everything that's coming out of me. So I invested more in therapy because I almost lost my mind trying to save the intellectual property that I failed to protect because I didn't know any better at the time. You know, so now I just would advise everybody who is developing, make sure you're also investing in your mental health as well, because as a founder, as a leader of your company, everything comes back to you. Everything revolves around you. You're the source of that energy, not just the source of that idea, but the energy that's going out into your business. So yes, George, I'm creating more shows. Developing shows right now while I'm working on this show. So yes, I'm working for another company, but I also have my company. I have the Purpose Producer podcast, and I also have Georgia Dawkins Media, where I provide media consultant services as well. There are more shows coming and there are more books coming, because I definitely have to write about the last few years of this legal struggle of intellectual property, not just mental health, but the fight for my mental health and fighting for my property.
That's powerful.
Absolutely. It
also sounds like a movie, Georgia.
Oh, I'm gonna be doing movies too, George.
Scribble it down.
One thing I want to add as well, and thanks, John, for putting that in the chat. Volunteer Lawyers for the Arts is an incredibly powerful organization that provides pro bono legal advice. And there are chapters in every state and most major cities. In addition, a lot of law firms encourage their attorneys to work on matters pro bono. And a lot of those tend to be with artists and creatives. And so just know that there are ways to speak with attorneys without having to pay them. You should definitely check out some of the sources that are being put in the chat there. But do look for volunteer lawyers for the arts, and know that at a minimum, you can at least get information and advice that will let you know where else you need to go. If you need to do additional research, or actually speak with someone to manage an entire case for you, they can at least point you in the right direction, give you a referral, and maybe even give you a sense of if you might be able to protect your IP more than you are.
Wow, that is a major key right there. Pro bono work for the artists and creators, because like I said, it can be very difficult depending on where you are. I mean, look, in LA, it's expensive just to live. So just having that extra advice and going into projects, and most people who are out here are for the creative purpose, and to have somewhere that they can go to get that kind of legal advice that's affordable, that's super key. So definitely appreciate that. That's shout out to my man John Delaney. He was little technical difficulties. We appreciate that information, though, brother. But that all great information, man. I think we're about to wrap up here pretty soon. Did you have any last words that you want to give to people when it comes to protecting their art, or finding out where they can get these services, or just a mindset? You know, Georgia mentioned earlier about making sure that your therapy is right, because it can be an ongoing battle sometimes dealing with protecting what's yours, and you don't really realize what that battle will be until you're in it already. You know, and I've seen so many people who've had their ideas taken away from them just for simply not knowing, you know, where to go for help, or not knowing how certain people get taken advantage of.
That's why I think it's so powerful that Georgia shared her stories, because those are tangible, real things that happen and could happen to anyone, because a lot of IP protection is not common knowledge. So I would say education is the first piece. I think watching a panel like this to learn just a little bit more, to hopefully spark your interest, and then go and check out books, check out some of these free online courses, talk to your attorney friends, check out Volunteer Lawyers for the Arts, ask questions, ask lots of questions, because just remember, whatever you've created really has value, and someone else will find it just as valuable, if not more.
I'm gonna call my therapist, but I took some notes for you guys last night, and I had to ask myself, why am I on this panel, and what can I offer? A lot of people say that I overshare, and maybe you shouldn't talk about all those things because you could still sue them. I made a decision not to do so, because I need my energy, I need my money and my time for everything I'm creating from here on out. So I had to take that L. Sometimes it's more valuable to take the L than to take them to court. But I would say, when you build with your feelings, you get hurt. And that's what I did. Focus on your foundation, focus on your strategy, and focus on your gift. And know that we are in Atlanta. And so on every level, you're going to run into scammers. And know that the devil is a master of disguise. It's his job to say, look at me. I'm your reflection. I look just like you. I'm a struggling Black woman as well. I grew up, I was a single parent. You know, they're going to find that common ground to lure you in and take advantage of everything that you have to give. Those are your gifts. If your mother gives you something on Christmas, you're not going to take it down the street to the neighbor and say, break my gift. So protect your gift, protect your intellectual property, and buy my book on Amazon.
Product placement.
Hey, look, promote
talk about it. So
hey,
this was the first thing I created that I own. So this is the thing that I'm most proud of. This is the body of work that I'm most proud of, because I own it. I own it. Everything everybody said I couldn't do, I did it, and I put it in the book. So I write a lot about my mental health as well, my journey to entrepreneurship, and my journey to leaving Sister Circle. I write about those last few days that led up to me handing in my resignation and then writing my book in 8 days.
Wow, that's powerful.
Drake once said, own it. You know, so I definitely feel you. That is definitely powerful stuff. Honestly, you know, that story, I think, was well received, and it's something that needed to be shared. And, you know, to be able to have your truth be put out there. And like you said, I really like the fact of the L needs to be taken sometimes, because that is the most valuable lesson. You know, you learn the most from some of your losses, and the W's, you definitely take them in stride, and you celebrate, but you're going to learn a lot more from those losses. And it seemed like you learned a great deal from that. And I think it's only going to make you better. And only the sky is going to be the limit for you, for sure. And Carolyn, man, look, you definitely came on here without giving the official legal advice. I think you can go ahead and just we're going to send the invoice link to everybody that was in the chat, just in case, because I think Carolyn probably gave too much than what she probably wanted today. But we definitely appreciate you, like, definitely giving us those plugs on just how to protect ourselves. I mean, that's just so valuable, and just knowing what our worth is and our value, because look, desperation, I think, will make any of us do the wrong thing. You know, especially as artists and creators, you want to just get to that level so bad that when somebody gives you that opportunity, you're like, I'll just take whatever I want. Look, you said $10,000. Okay, cool, fine. My name. All right, cool. And the next thing you know is making millions of dollars down the line, and then you only have $10,000 in your pocket.
Next thing you know, they in season 3. They in season 3 and you broke. They in season 3 and you can't pay your student loans.
They in whole syndication. You still over here just trying to pay your light bill and whatnot. You know what I mean? So those are real stories of being taken advantage of. And they know, like you said, they know the words in order to find those commonalities and know like what pulls the heartstrings. They know where you come from. They know that you don't have much family somewhere, and that this dream that you're trying to pursue is something that is almost ridiculous. You know, so sometimes we feel like we have to do ridiculous things or go on ridiculous standards in order to be able to make it. But, you know, I could always say, never thirsty, always hungry. You know, so I definitely appreciate you guys for coming on here today. I've definitely learned a lot in this session. Some words that I had to look up.
I took
Absolutely.
notes.
Yep. Well, for sure. Some words I had to look up on my own. But either way, I feel like it was very well worth it. And I definitely want to just appreciate you guys one more time for coming out here. Is there any last questions that you want to ask them? We got one more minute left. How can we follow y'all? Okay. Carolyn, if you want to start, and then Georgia, you can go.
I will tell you how you can follow me. I am at Pittesque, Pittesque. I'll put it in the chat. That's my personal IG. And I'm at Film Connects, which I'll also put in the chat for Film Connects, my enterprise. The final thing I'll say before I hand it back over to Georgia is no one can be a better you than you can. And so what I know for sure is that you are about to be even more successful than you might have been had you gotten everything you meant to get from your initial endeavors that you just mentioned. There's more coming down the road. And so look out, world.
Ooh, I felt like that was a word for me, but I didn't know if it was a word for me, but it was
a word for you. Yeah.
I'm gonna cash up you my offering, but definitely thank you so much. And you can follow me at Georgia Dawkins on all social media platforms, but please support the Purpose Producer podcast at the Purpose Producer on Instagram and on all podcast platforms. So thank you. And you can get my book on Amazon. Everybody knows the power of being in position.
Absolutely. And I'm George K. Burns. You can follow me at George K. Burns and www.com, George K. Burns. I know you heard my name a lot of times at a time. And got some things going on, man, doing shows in LA and around the country. Not right now, though, because I don't want no COVID from y'all. But got some stuff coming out, man. I'm super excited about super dope project that I got in production right now in development. I can't say too much about it, but still super excited. Guys,
that's like an NDA and is involved.
That IP.
It sounds like I ain't trying to mess nothing up. That's what that means. But definitely, man, guys, this has been a wonderful time. I had a bunch of fun. I hope you guys had as much fun as we did up here. Like I said, my good friend Georgia, Carolyn, she now my good friend. We just met in this last hour. You know what I mean? But either way, we good to go. You guys have a great rest of the day. This has been the intellectual property IP session. We're going to wrap it up.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.